The reading this morning is taken from a transmission given almost exactly 60 years ago on August the 28th, 1960, and it was delivered actually by Mars Sector 6 and the Master Aetherius. I'm mainly going to be reading from Mars Sector 6. It was given at the Northern Spacecraft Convention in Berkeley, California, Northern California. And the whole transmission is almost an hour in length, so one can only imagine the strain and difficulty it imposed upon our Master in a public convention, being in a positive yogic samadhic trance, bringing through these two great masters for almost 1 hour. Of course, in 1960, we're talking about the time of the Cold War and the Soviet Union. I mentioned that because, as you will hear, comes into the extract somewhat. And it was also the height of the Cold War, the atomic experimentation. And that is also just perhaps even more relevant to us today even than it was back then. Believe it or not, those who operate the so-called doomsday clock have now moved it closer than ever before to midnight. It's now 100 seconds from midnight, such is the danger that is currently prevalent on our world with so much anxiety, nuclear proliferation, etc. So this transmission, although given, as I say, 60 years ago, is as relevant to us today as it was then, maybe more so. Mars Sector 6. This is Mars Sector 6 reporting from satellite number 3, now in orbit Jupiter. Subject, be not limited. O brothers of Earth, in these last days, in these days of trial and tribulation, in these days when the forces of light are liable to pass through the initiation of crucifixion, be not limited. In these days, the workers in the genuine cosmic plan, specifically designed to bring about a transformation of terror, need not be limited. For greater power than ever before will be yours if you but tread the narrow, precipitous path unto the goal of truth. If you divorce yourselves from the great temptation of materialism, which will be dangled in many colors before your gaze. A vast number of the inhabitants of terror have allowed themselves to become the pawns of communism. Another great number have allowed themselves to become the pawns, so-called, of democracy. The few, the thinking few, the glorious few, have divorced themselves from these things and are not the pawns of any political creed, any dogmatic belief. These few know a greater freedom than the majority, for they are not limited to basic materialistic concepts. In the new world, you need not plan for a better economic system, for economy as you know it will not exist. It is a cancer in the heart of spiritual man. In the new world, you need not listen to this or that, who will make great political promise to you, for politics as such will not exist. In the new world, you will need have no fear of horror weapons hung over your heads, like the terrible sword of a vicious Damocles, for these weapons will be destroyed. In the new world, you need not plan how to break down your customs barriers, for there will be no countries. There will be inhabited land and sea. That is all. How do you go towards this goal? By training your intuition of this moment, so that your discrimination is so enhanced that you can see the faults and detach yourself from it. You cannot detach yourself from that which you are not aware of. So therefore, become aware, then detach. Become aware of the great spiritual truths, and then attach yourself to these. My friends, you will notice by keen study that not once in any true message to terror given by an agent from another planet have we ever told you that one political system was better than another. For we advise detachment from all existing systems. We have reminded you often that every form of politics has been tried, but to fail horribly. Most of them to fail horribly on some bloody battlefield. Most of them to run away with the blood of the slain and stain the green earth red, steaming red. You do not need to be a man of perception in order to discover this for yourself. You do not need to be an adept in order to formulate for yourself a great workable philosophy, which you can now start to demonstrate in your own life and become a living part of this philosophy, so that others may copy you, may be guided by you, may be gently led by you into their own enlightenment. Discrimination will show you this way. These are the last days. These are the days when the prophecies will be worked out, when mankind will be weighed in the balance of karma. Those found wanting will be reborn upon a younger planet. Those who have advanced far enough will go into the great millennium upon terror. Then will the earth, as you call it, move on her axis, change her place in relationship to the sun, and the new day will dawn. It is today when the pattern of tomorrow is forged. Forge this well, O brothers. Be brave. Let not fear grasp your hearts, so that you become weak. Be undaunted. Be united in your efforts. Be united in your efforts, so that you may be a worthy channel for inspiration, so that you may be a worthy channel for the higher forces to flow through you out unto all mankind. And I'd like to add this one paragraph from the Master Aetherius. The gist of our message this evening is to make this known fact to you. Come together. Cooperate together. Drop petty differences. Transmute them in the light of spirituality and use the great powers which will be offered to you. And during this time, you can so alter the karmic pattern of yourselves, of your community, of your country, that greater things will be brought about. You can draw your own picture, you know, in the Akashic records of time. In fact, every thought and action you perform adds a little bit more to this Akashic picture. Will not you think of this the next time you think? Will not you use the greater part of yourself in this way, so that you can draw for yourself an everlasting, glorious picture in these timeless records? Very, very inspiring and remarkable words by the great cosmic masters. Now, the address this morning will be given by myself, dare I say it. It's a bit of a one-man band today. And the address is titled, A Time of Endurance. And speaking of a time of endurance, I think any of you who have ever been required to spend a relatively prolonged period of time in my company will have no doubt experienced a time of endurance. But I say that slightly tongue-in-cheek because for those who have spent a certain amount of time in my company, no doubt will have heard me at some point in time relate the great epic story of the Endurance, which was the ship of Sir Ernest Shackleton and his crew of 27 men that in 1914 sailed to Antarctica with the great mission, or not the great mission, but the great task of crossing the Antarctic via the South Pole, something that had never been accomplished before. And this, of course, was during what is known as the heroic time of polar exploration. It truly is, if any of you have not come across this story, it truly is an incredibly epic and remarkable, and I would even add karmic, tale of heroism and endurance. Very briefly, to retell it, or recall it, Ernest Shackleton and his crew of 27 men sailed from England in August of 1914, just actually as World War I was breaking out, but they were given the command by Sir Winston Churchill, who was in charge of the Naval Office, who gave them a one-word telegram, proceed, because they were in doubt as to whether they should go, which is interesting in itself. And then they sailed for the island of South Georgia in the southern Atlantic Ocean, and from there made their way to Antarctica. And after a certain amount of time, their ship, Endurance, became trapped in the ice. And there is a saying that what the ice takes, the ice keeps. And after several months of drifting in this ice pack, in their trapped ship, it was eventually crushed and sank. So Shackleton and his team were many hundreds of miles from the ocean, which they had to reach by dragging their 3 lifeboats, heavy lifeboats, with as much stuff as they could carry over the jagged ice pack. And to make 1 or 2 miles in a day was considered good going. Well, eventually they did reach the ocean's edge, the jet black, ice-cold waters of the southern Atlantic. But they were still many hundreds of miles from safety. The nearest island was an island that had never been had a foot set upon it before, known as Elephant Island. And so they cast their 3 lifeboats into these jet black, ice-cold waters with killer whales swirling around, occasionally surfacing with their jet black eye, piercing them and threatening to capsize their boats at any moment. Their rations were a biscuit a day, which they would look at for breakfast, suck for lunch, and eat for dinner. But they eventually made it, miraculously, to Elephant Island. But they were still several hundred miles from safety, well below the path that the whaling ships would take. And so their only hope was for one of these lifeboats, the James Caird, named after the Scotsman, wealthy Scotsman who had largely financed this expedition. For 6 of them to make this continued epic journey, 800 miles over the most dangerous seas on the planet of the South Atlantic, in the extremely remote chance that they actually might reach South Georgia Island from where they had set out over a year before. Well, incredibly, and to keep the story short, the 6 managed to reach South Georgia Island, an incredible tale, largely thanks to the exceptional navigator they had, a New Zealander, James Worsley, who, with him taking part in this whole expedition in itself, was remarkable. I do encourage you to look into it. The trouble was they were on the wrong side of South Georgia Island, which had a mountain range running down the middle of it that no man had ever crossed. And so 3 of them set out, their only hope, to cross this mountain range without food, in threadbare clothing, in the hope that they might make it to the whaling station on the other side, which they did. And the next day, the whaling station, in a state of complete shock and disbelief at the state of Shackleton and the 2 companions, went round to the other side of the ocean to rescue those 3 men. But there were still 22 men stuck on Elephant Island, and this is really what I want to get into in this address. They all knew that Shackleton and the other 5 men had almost no chance of making it to safety, but it was better than all remaining for the rest of their short lives on Elephant Island. And the man in charge, Shackleton's second in command, was a man called Frank Wild. And every day Frank Wild would say to the men, "The boss is coming today. Pack up your sleeping bag. Get ready. The boss is coming today." Well, I can imagine they were willing and able to do that with a certain amount of enthusiasm for a week or 2. But as the weeks turned into months, they must have abandoned all hope. But still, Frank Wild would tell them, "The boss is coming today." Well, to wrap this story up, after 3 attempts, this, as I mentioned, this was the time of World War I, Britain was unable and certainly unwilling to loan Shackleton a ship to get back to Elephant Island to rescue those 22 men. And after 3 attempts, thanks to help from the Chilean government, 4 months later, Shackleton was able to make it down to Elephant Island. In those 4 months, his hair went from black to white through anxiety. And unbelievably, as he used his binoculars, he could count 1, 2 to 22 men. They were all still alive. Well, one may well ask, how does this tie in to us? What's the relevance of this story? I would say that we in the Aetherius Society are on an even more epic and heroic journey. It's one thing to cross the Antarctic before anybody else via the South Pole, but we are in a position where we are holding together a whole world. And it is, in a way, a time of endurance, and it's made more difficult, obviously, during this time of the pandemic. And nerves can be frayed, and we can become a little bit restless. I think it's important to bear in mind the boss is coming today. If I was to use one line during this period of waiting, and when we are waiting, perhaps we're waiting for the coming of the next master. I had an email from a member asking this very question just a few days ago. Perhaps we're waiting, or we are certainly waiting, you could say, for the bright new dawn, as described in that transmission from Mars Sector 6. But the line I think that certainly stands out most to myself is a line from the Master Jesus' prayer to the adepts, when he tells us to stand unflinchingly by the side of these. What does that mean? What does that mean for you? What does that mean for myself, to stand unflinchingly? I think it means, at least in part, taking from this transmission, Be Not Limited, from Mars Sector 6, to really detach ourselves from all other lesser things that come into our life, that distract us, that take up our time. As Mars Sector 6 says, far greater power than ever before will be yours if you but tread the narrow, precipitous path unto the goal of truth. This narrow path. We don't need to become ensnared in the other things. All they do is disperse our energy and our focus, which does not just affect us and the Aetherius Society, but as we heard, it affects our community and even our country and even our world. How can you do this? Mars Sector 6 asks us. By training your intuition at this moment so that you can see the faults and detach yourself. Become aware of the great spiritual truths and then attach yourself to these. Our Master was the first to say, or not the first to say, but often would say, that he could not have blind faith in anything. And he certainly did not expect us to have blind faith in anything. But he had an unbreakable faith in the cosmic masters and in the cosmic plan and in God. And I think we've been given more than enough evidence to have an intuitive realization of the great spiritual truths that have been given to us and which are unfolding upon our world. The great spiritual truth, the greatest spiritual truth beyond God itself, at least as pertaining to our world, is that the initiation of earth has happened and that a bright new dawn will come. We know that the lower astral realms have been cleaned out of their worst. We can have an intuitive faith in satellite number 3. Greater power than ever before will be given unto you. When we detach ourselves from the petty things in our life and focus on the real, great, lasting things upon our world at this time. And so I think as we are now at this time, what I'm terming a time of endurance, a time also to reflect and to consider this great epic journey we are all on. And I think everybody who comes into the Aetherius Society, everybody who joins the Aetherius Society should be absolutely aware of this great, fantastic, heroic, epic journey that we are on, that has been paved for us by our Master and the adepts and the great cosmic masters. We are their hope. I think somewhere it says the only hope. Which is not to say that there are not many, many, many other people in our world doing wonderful work. But it's the Aetherius Society that has been entrusted with Operation Sunbeam, and the Saturn mission, and the spiritual energy radiators that are holding this world together. And without us and these missions, who knows how our world would be at this time. So I think it is a great time to, quote the Master Aetherius, drop our petty differences. And I leave it for you and for myself to consider what they may be compared to the grand scheme of things and this great epic journey that we are on, and to focus ourselves on this narrow, precipitous path of true greatness that we are on. And remember that the boss is coming back. We have been told that we will meet, those who are faithful will meet our Master again, and the adepts in their full aspect. The next Master is coming. Are we ready for that? Am I ready for that? To remember another great epic terrestrial journey, that of Odysseus or Ulysses. No one recognized him except his dog. Isn't that a wonderful thought? His dog never gave up, never forgot his master. And I think, perhaps in closing, that when we do push aside all these other petty things that come into our life, and when we do take and grasp, stand unflinchingly by the side of these great cosmic adepts, and make this the real, true purpose of our life, everything else in our life will be taken care of and will be well met. Thank you.